This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we have Kata Dumur. You're in Germany, correct?
Yes, hello?
Yes, so you're in Germany, right?
Yes.
And you are a composer and producer of and sound artist,
Yeah,
and you do experimental, industrial, classically influenced music.
that's correct.
And in your bio, it talks about how you want to work with kind of between the crossroads of film and electronic media.
Yeah,
You like to work with like dancers and technologists and VJs.
exactly. Yes, I'm very, very open to this kind of collaborations. And yeah, I did some of those, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. So you were born in Warsaw, but
Exactly,
you're
yes.
currently, and in the town you're in, is it called Graffeling? How do you pronounce that town in Germany?
It's Grapefruit.
Okay, yeah, it's hard for
Oh,
an American.
sorry. It's the A with the dots is like so it's like Grapefruit.
Okay, so you started in your career. You were in a classical choir,
Yes.
um, and then you moved into electronic compositions with found sounds. And maybe we'll talk about what found sounds mean. I think I understand what that is, but maybe our audience wants to know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you're since 2013, you're the second half of a duo called Lich Pause. Is that how you say it? Lich Pause?
We call it Lichtpause. Of course, it's a
Lich
German
Pause.
name, but it's very interesting how you will pronounce it because, of course, we don't want just to be in
Yeah.
Germany active. We would like to,
So
perform
Lich
everywhere.
Pause. Lich Pause is how you say it.
Yeah, more or less, yes.
And so you were formerly in DMKD, but that you became Lich Pause.
Exactly.
And you write and produce with Quantize is another producer you work with.
Yes.
And and so you've been inspired from what it says, like electroacoustical composers, soundscapes, 80s sound, new wave sound. Yeah, so you're in a space, and I'm an electronic musician myself, so I'm very much intrigued by what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's kind of the space I live in as well. Um, so we're going to get into the questions that we always ask. So I'll start it with, I see that you were in classical choir, but when you first got into music, like what age did you get into music?
Um, I think it was gradually happening. So I think as a child, I was very interested in music, just like that. And
Mm-hmm.
singing was very natural to me, and I think this was the first thing. And as I was, I think, around 8 years old, I had a first like a hearing at some sort of like a school choir, and they qualified me like as someone who has good hearing, good musical ear. And I was already then like told, okay, you have that ear, and that's
Mm-hmm.
something yeah, so to say, you qualify for music. Like,
So
very
you
fun.
you so you focused on your voice as your primary instrument, or did you go on to other instruments as well?
So at first, actually, it was like this, that I just had that information, and my mom did something very funny. I think she was a very young mother, and she actually asked me if I want to go to the music school, and I said
Mm-hmm.
no. I said,
Oh
no,
wow!
I don't, because I thought, because she told me it's going to be so much work, it will be very difficult. And I was like, no, I don't want. I was so small. So how could I
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
How would you know?
how would I know? So that was really, really funny from my mom's, but it's really just a hilarious memory. But I was always, prone to that stuff. So one day I went with my grandpa to some like a little music store, and you have to remember this is like somehow Warsaw in the 90s, so like really
Yeah.
fresh capitalism, not even really, I would say. um,
Yeah, you might.
and we found like a very small keyboard, and I got glued to this keyboard. So it was clear that someday I got this keyboard as a present, and I was very happy. So actually, like some messing around on the keyboard, how I call it, started quite
Wow.
early. Yeah, and that was just improvising on my own, and I never got lessons. So again, my family was supporting me, but then I was just free, so I was free to explore that. And then came the guitar, because I really liked Queen, for example. This was my first favorite band. And somehow I was into rock music at the beginning, and I really wanted to learn to play guitar. And I did. I could, again, my family supported me. And I learned a little bit like rock guitar playing, but still acoustic guitar, with some young musician. But I was like a fresh teenager, and I was just not really knowing what I'm doing. And I also was going to like a youth center to learn
Mhm.
classical guitar, the classical
Okay.
guitar where you have to place your foot properly, you have to place your arms properly. So I did that for 1 year, but I was a little bit suffering, with all that classical guitar thing.
Yeah, that's interesting
Yeah.
because I talked to an artist a couple of days ago, and she was like had learned like classical violin, and she kind of got burned out on the positioning, because they
Yeah.
were saying they had to have like the hand position in the right way, and yeah, and that would seem to be more important than even like playing the music, and that seemed to like kind of dissuade her from wanting to do it. And it tends to, I see a lot of musicians that go into classical and then they kind of get fed up and go into other forms of more popular music or experimental music because they don't want to be constrained. um,
Exactly. Yes, that's the thing. So yeah, I survived that, and I had like it was finished with a concert, so I had to play the concert, and then I said, no, I don't want the classical guitar anymore. Yeah.
yeah. Well, you're if you so this was like the '90s, or
Yeah, this was like the 90s, and yeah, and I was more and more so like my influences, like my musical influences are really very broad, I would say, because I then listened to a lot of metal music,
Mhm.
and got into some kind of like between metal and electro, and society, I don't know, group of people. So this was quite a funny combination. And yeah, and somehow during high school, I felt that I have to do something with my voice. So I think I was like 15, 16, I guess. And I found, an invitation at the choir to, to have a look, if I could fit into the choir.
Mhm.
And I went there, and this was just a wonderful group of people. And what was the best about it, that we sang, all kind of sacred music, but also, sacred and classical music pieces written for the choir. But the choir itself was very secular, so like was not religious at all.
Okay, it
And
was secular. Yeah.
yeah, that was very cool, because we were basically like a bunch of atheists singing classical and sacred music, and that was really great.
Well, yeah, it's
And
interesting because a lot of electronic music, like I'm a big progressive electronic music. My heroes are like, Brian Eno, the Yes, Bernie Worrell, Sun Ra. I mean, I listen to a lot of like experimental progressive, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. That's kind of where I'm coming from. But what's interesting, Frank Zappa used to use a lot of classical
mhm,
music
mhm,
in his band. He actually could write music, and he used to actually write music for strings and for full orchestras to go with his music. And I was always very interested in bands that were willing to kind of go beyond just rock and bring other things in, Pink Floyd's of the world, things like that. But yeah, that's interesting. What you started on a keyboard, and then you went into the choir, and then you were still interested in rock and heavy metal, so you got a lot of influences, which maybe we'll go deeper into it. um But when you're talking about the thing I found interesting is your description of found sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of tell the audience what you mean by found sounds?
Yes. So perhaps people can refer to also to something like field recordings.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's what I
these,
thought.
yeah, so these are the sounds that we can record from our environment, from everything that is around us. There can be physical objects, there can be natural sounds like birds or water or atmosphere, anything like that. So it can be artificial sounds produced by some object, or it can be, natural. Yeah, something
Now,
like that.
I was listening to your song from your album, The Mosaic,
Mm-hmm.
and Farewell to All and Ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like there's some very interesting samples or found sounds in that song.
Yes,
Um,
thank you.
and so, are those samples or field recordings?
These are field recordings.
Well, I like that. I really like that because I'm kind of like an old school guy. I mean, I'm big into like the '70s, and the band Yes
Mm-hmm.
actually went into a forest and did a field recording on Close to the Edge.
Oh yeah.
It's actually the sounds of a forest. Actually, is a field recording that starts that album. And so I've always been very interested in bands that do that or artists that do that. And so it's interesting to see you doing that with a field recording. I find that very, very, very cool. And I kind of segged into it just because we talked about what the definition of found sounds, and then when I was listening to the Mosaic, I really heard that in the Farewell to All and Ever,
Thank you.
which I
That's
really liked.
yeah. I'm very happy that you liked it and that you could hear it. Yes. So I really like to. I think this one was some outside sound, maybe bushes or something like that, but I'm not sure. I will keep it as a secret. So
Yeah, it's just really cool how you used it.
you know what I do? I really like to use granular synthesis.
Oh,
And
you use granular synthesis. That's an
yeah.
interesting. So I'm more of a subtractive and additive synthesis guy. I've
Mm.
never really gotten to granular. I don't really have any machines that can do it yet. But it's cool that you're doing it. So what kind of granular synthesis tool are you using?
I'm using a software synth, a plugin from New Arts. It's called. Let me see. I will have a look on my laptop.
That's cool.
But it's called Granite.
Wow. Yeah, so
Um,
I've been looking at some hardware machines that do it
mhm.
because I'm more of a hardware guy.
Yes.
But yeah, I appreciate anybody tool that anybody uses, but that's interesting. You're the first electronic musician in 3 years that's actually brought up granular synthesis. So maybe you can tell the audience like what goes into doing granular synthesis as a musician.
Mm-hmm. So I found the name. It's a New Sonic Arts. It's a very small manufacturer, I think, and yeah, I especially like this one. It's the Granite. So basically, but for example, in Ableton, I don't know if Granulator. I think if it's the new like
Version,
plugin or version which they
no
have
plugin.
now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure with which package it comes with, but so basically the granular synthesis takes, you can load a sample into this kind of plugin or a device, and then this plugin will have slices and will slice the sample that you load in to a very tiny, we call grains. That's why granular
Oh,
synthesis.
oh,
Yeah, and
yeah,
so
yeah.
therefore where you press the button, or you can either play it by, let's say in the case of a plugin
MIDI.
with MIDI,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you can let it just play on its own, because for example some plugins they play continuously, so until you don't switch the plugin off, the sound is going on, right? So there are two settings, so the settings can be always adjusted. um, and yeah, and what's interesting is that you can then set the length of the grain or the size of the grain,
Mm-hmm.
and with that you will have, with any small setting, a very different sound quality. a very,
That's interesting because I think,
yeah.
yeah, because I actually saw a demo of somebody using a granular hardware synth, and it had like a screen where you could actually see the grains, and you could actually like physically on this like really big screen actually really map it out. But weird. I think I have a machine that does something somewhat similar on my Eurorack. I have a
Mm-hmm.
Make Noise Morphogene, which is a Eurorack sampler that actually does like splices and genes, and it can actually time warp. But it's all hardware. You can't see anything other than it's all, it has some visual cues with color.
Mm-hmm.
But since you can't physically see the wave, all you can see are these color indications of what you've got. You can do like a 3-minute sample, and then you can change the gene size, and you can morph it. You can time shift the beginning to the middle, to the end, to the middle, to wherever point, and play with it. And I tend to sample my own songs, and then I bring them into the sampler, and then do all this morphing
Mm-hmm.
that I think ends up doing basically granular synthesis to a Eurorack module.
That could be,
but
yeah.
but yeah, it's cool. It's cool. What you're doing though with the field recording, because then you can actually play it as a chord. Can you actually play a grain as a chord or just a single note?
I think yes, you can play a chord. It's quite. Then you have to be careful, how big it sounds and
How, yeah,
yeah.
how big the sound is. Yeah,
But yeah, I think
yeah.
it's
It's probably
possible.
yeah, it's probably a little more controllable with single notes than chords, because then it can probably maybe go beyond what you want.
Exactly.
If you open it up to like a complicated chord, like a 5-finger chord, then it might go a little. Well, maybe you'd like the result, but maybe it's less controllable. Yeah, but that's really interesting. Kind of went off there just because we started getting into the details of your music. But in terms of your influences and reference points, if we were going to say talk about the artists that inspired you,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe people who would know, who are artists, or even like a literature, or who inspires you in your music.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's a long story from the beginning because I had so many broad inspirations, and when I was thinking like how to start answering that question, and again I have to refer to my mom because I think she's responsible for bringing the music, for example, like Vangelis or Jean-Michel Jarre
Oh,
to me.
and, mm-hmm.
And she was the one who was buying music like that, and she listened to it at home, and so I think that was I loved that music. I loved the atmospheres. So I think that was my subconscious, although I liked rock music at the beginning and some heavy metal, but that music was really something that took me in a different place, and I guess that was the starting point, where my somehow inside feelings were going towards electronic music. And
Yeah, do you like to do like instrumental electronic music less so than maybe like synth wave or new wave, where you actually have vocals, or like more traditional, like maybe popular music structures? You're more into the expansive or ambient sound, experimental music side of electronic music.
yeah, I think so. Um, so naturally, somehow, yeah, I was just exposed to so many things, and then I really liked, as I mentioned, like bands like Queen or U2, for example, was a big influence to me, and I think that gave me this, a good feeling for song structure. Although I'm deliberately not doing it in my music yet, but I'm really, as you know, the band DMKD, like we wrote songs, so that there is more of a normal song structure, and that
Yeah. It's just your current work is this, like, well, I guess I'm focusing because it's like 2020, but I
yeah.
am going to link to your older work.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think in the future I'm actually I think I will do some more song structure things, just to see.
So will you kind of merge? Would you merge what you did with DMKD, what you're doing with Lich Puz?
Something like that, or like the
It would
Kata
be like
Dumur
it would be
sound.
like
Yeah, the
Yeah.
experimental sound with like a more of a song structure. So I'm working on that now, and I hope like next year I can bring that out.
It'll be like a hybrid.
Yeah.
It'll be a hybrid of both styles, and then so people can, because a lot of times like some music fans, they can't handle things that don't have vocals,
That's
and
true.
you end up being in a niche market. If you don't have vocals, then you get, well, you're in the EDM or you're in the ambient music or experimental music. You can't get into the pop charts or the bigger charts because it's perceived that that's a smaller audience. Um, but once you add vocals, then suddenly you open yourself up to a bigger, like, world of fans. So then bands will try to go into that. But it's interesting you mentioned U2, because I'm a big fan of
Oh.
The Unforgettable Fire and what Brian
Mm-hmm.
Eno did with the band, and even like The Edge. It's really interesting what happens when you're a young kid, like The Edge and the rest of the band. They didn't really get formal training,
Mm-hmm.
and so U2 is a really good example of if you're somebody that just has a lot of passion and you come up with your own style. They built their own style of music that doesn't sound like anything else. I mean, the other bands have tried to copy them, maybe Coldplay, but
Absolutely.
yeah, The Edge I saw a documentary where he showed this big rack of sonic manipulation that he uses on his guitar, and he would show, well, the root of what I'm doing is just the two is like an interval, but because I run through all these effects, it sounds like way more complicated than what I'm actually doing. And what I used to love about what I love about the Edge is that he takes very simple phrases and simple structures on his guitar, but he runs them through all these effects and creates sounds that nobody would have even imagined.
Exactly.
Um,
Yes.
by him,
I remember
and
that
it's
documentary.
very progressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very progressive. It's just as progressive as listening to like Sun Ra or listening to Coltrane. I mean, it's very innovative to take something simple and then make it complex, or take something complex and it seems simple. I've always been drawn to musicians that can do that.
I think that's the main thing, like with years and years. I had many years like when I was thinking, oh, how to figure this out, what's the correct way to write music, or how it's supposed to be, in the correct way. There is no correct way, right? But then you find it out
Yeah,
after many years that, yeah, you just have to do your thing. You just have to let your feelings speak,
yeah,
and then it comes. And but with all the bands that I like, or the people and the artists, is that I see sometimes really simple phrases, but often simple phrases put together, they give something powerful. They bring a special rhythm, or they bring a special harmony. But they are themselves very, they're just sometimes three notes, two notes, and it's not, more is not necessary.
yeah. It doesn't have to. I mean, I get into when you see like an Eddie Van Halen, or you get the heavy metal classically trained guitar players that can do these amazing runs,
Mm-hmm.
and they're very complicated. But then I go back and I'll listen to like Lead Belly, or I'll listen to Hendrix, or listen to Stevie Ray Vaughan. And there's something about having a simpler phrase that has like more kind of raw emotion to it. And it might not be lightning fast, but it has a lot of power in its emotion. Um, and that's why I've always been kind of drawn to like I have a lot of modes,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been very drawn into electronic music because of Moog. Moog is one of the first guys to ever build electronic instruments back in the '50s, and I've been lucky enough to collect a bunch of Moogs. And what I found about them is because they're hand built, and they're these electronic instruments, they kind of live and breathe. I mean, when you turn them on, they take like 20 minutes to warm up.
Mm-hmm.
When you first start playing them, how they behave when they're not fully warmed up is different than how they behave when they are warmed up. And so they just kind of provide you inspiration in their kind of variability nature, that they're not always going to sound the same from day to day, from hour to hour. And as a musician, you can kind of use that in a way to be very improvisational. And I've been very much focused in the last couple of years. I had a lot of digital since I had lots of Rolands. I still have them, but I've been diving into analog just because I like the nature of being able to create my own pads and my own patches from scratch, and just kind of reinventing the wheel all the time. And just the capabilities you have with like an LFO. If you take a low frequency oscillator, you can make it seem like a sequencer. You know, if you know what you're doing with the waveforms and the envelope generators, you can actually create patterns without using a sequencer. You can actually have the waveforms create patterns through the envelopes and the LFOs, and you know, through like random voltage generators. And I've been very focused in the last couple of years of doing that type of experimental music. It goes back to the
Mm-hmm.
50s with the first electronic music, but I like what you're doing with your field recordings. Kind of goes back to that as well, and then the way you put things together in your music. I hear a lot of progressive kind of concepts, which is really
Thank you,
cool.
thank you. Yeah, that's the beauty of the hardware and tangible things is that they are unpredictable, and sometimes millimeters that you move are create something different. That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, the slight turn on a dial on a Moog has exponential effects. So if you just turn the low pass filter a tiny bit and then you turn the resonance just a tiny bit, you can get wildly different behavior. Um, and it's that kind of variability or capability that just like inspires the artist. You know, like what you're doing with the ability to do the granular synthesis is similar to what you can do on a subtractive synth. If you've got like a very complicated subtractive synth that has a lot of capabilities, has tons of LFOs, you can do all this minor tweaking on any of the dials or the sliders, and it suddenly becomes very significant.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So you say the granular synthesis is that your preferred method, or do you mix it with like FM synthesis or additive synthesis and subtractive? Or are you really diving into granular more?
I actually like to write music, I think. So I'm very MIDI. So I like to have good melodies, although they are quite experimental,
Mm-hmm.
or like good pads. And then I'm looking for a sound, and I'm like not really thinking which technique I'm using for it. So with granular, I know exactly that because it's very good for textures. Therefore, I will use the
Okay.
granular synthesis for textures. However, sometimes you can get a very interesting outcome, which can be very rhythmic, and then it can be part of the rhythm. So I like to experiment when I feel that there is a sound that I can get a lot out of it. Then I will, focus more on granular. But usually I'm focusing
Mm-hmm.
on like writing music even with a plain grand piano sound, and just to have like the kind of
Yeah, yeah.
harmony and vibe that I want. And then I'm tweaking, and then rather I think I'm working with effects. So I think I like to automate effects. I like to work with delay and to make very short automations on the delay, and
Mm-hmm.
some not obvious filter movements or sweepings or
Yeah, yeah. Like low. Do you like high pass or low pass? Do you have a preference? I know a lot of people they'll constantly use like ladder mode, like ladder
mhm.
filters. But then you've got state variable filters, you've got low pass filters, you have different specific filters that came from like Profit, or filters that were on like ARPs and different sense that are known filters have certain
Mhm.
characteristics. Do you have any kind of particular filter characteristic that you like more, like a Profit 5 filter versus a Curtis filter versus like a Moog filter? Do you have specific
No, I
preferences?
actually don't. I try to do everything very intuitively. So I'm rather thinking like trying to listen what I want to achieve. When the song takes me somewhere, the track takes me in some place, and then I'm thinking,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I would like that to be more, to expose more of high frequencies, or
Yeah.
expose more lower frequencies, or I need that or that. And then I search for the right tool. So,
Okay, so every song kind of like what I've talked is like sometimes I like to service the song because I get a song and I could say, well, I only use low pass filter, but then suddenly in this song I'm
Mm-hmm.
using a high pass filter. It's kind of like, well, it's whatever the
Yeah,
song
yeah.
needs, because I kind of feel like, to me, the music kind of comes from the muse. I'm a big fan of like Victorian poetry and that kind of idea. They like William Blake kind of felt there was like this muse coming through him, that he was feeling like all these things that made him write all these like epic poems, and he was kind of like a lot of artists sometimes feel like the universe kind of talks through them, and they can keep tap into it. And when you get into a song, you kind of get in a trance, where you kind of get in this kind of vibes, like it kind of comes from somewhere, and it starts to fall in place, and you're like, wow, I didn't really. It kind of showing me the
Exactly.
path. Again, like as I start to build it, there are things that are coming into it that particular song is going to have these characteristics, and the next song might not. It just, that song needs this, so I'm going to do this, and it's just going to
Exactly,
happen.
that's the thing. So, yeah, it may be Muse, it may be The Zone, or something, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So you
whatever
never know.
helps. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. It's just interesting what you pull in, because it's like I hear people that will go and say, "Well, I only like to use analog, or I'm into digital, or I use like wave tables." I kind of use whatever is going to work, right? So, I've got a Teenage Engineering
Hmm.
OPC.
Oh,
That's a
yeah.
digital set, but then I got my Moogs, and I've got my PCM synths, and I've got my samplers, and it's like, I've got my grand piano. It's like sometimes I might just start on a grand piano, and it's going to be to my keyboardist. So sometimes, like keyboardists in electronic music, initially they use Hammond B3s, and they used like clavichords, they used pianos, and then they would layer the synths on top of that. But you kind of start with the piano or the Hammond, because those instruments can do the chords. And initial synthesizers were only monophonic. So if you wanted to have a chord, you had to use like a Wurlitzer or a Hammond B3 to be able to do the chord, because a Moog, mini Moog
Yeah.
can't do a chord. Until you got to like Prophet Fives, or you got the Yamaha GX like 3, or like the big polyphonic synths in the 70s. You couldn't do chords on a synth. You could only do leads or bass lines, and then things opened it up, and the DX7 came, and Jupiter 8 came, and all these like polyphonic synths came. But everybody now, because you can use MIDI plugins and all kinds of sound modules on their Mac or their PC, and replicate like everything.
Yeah.
but but I'm kind of a purist. I still like hardware synths, just because I feel that they can provide you something that the software can't. And maybe I'm not right about that. Maybe that's my preference. But I kind of use whatever I can. If I have something in Ableton that I want to use, I'll use it. But 90% of the time, I'm using the hardware synth. Um, so do you have certain preferences for when you want to use like an acoustic instrument versus using a digital?
So recently I decided I need more interaction, more hands-on, tangible, feeling when I make music. So I decided like MIDI controllers don't give me that. Really. So
Mm-hmm.
actually in Lichtpause, in this new project with Quantize, we are working now with Roland machines. So this is something, it's still digital, but we have Roland 707 and TR-8S, but it's already, yeah,
Oh yeah, how do you
yeah,
like those? Do you really like? I heard that the MC707 is a really good groove box, kind of like an Akai MPC.
I think it's even better.
Like,
I think,
yeah. Well, I'm a Roland guy, and so I would always say the Roland is
yeah,
probably a little better.
I think it's great.
That's my
You,
own
you can
preference.
really make great sounds on it. It has a lot of stuff too. You can really make create your sounds and tweak them, and you have effects and many things. You can lay out the song. We also
We had like a Zencore. It has a Zencore synth engine in it, right? So you actually can do full synths in
exactly.
it,
So this
right?
is really great. There are also nice things which you can do with TR-8S. It's thought more as a drum machine, but I always like to use the machines against this, what they are designed for, or at least I'm trying. So
Yeah.
we um,
try to do more
Yeah,
than what it
and
was
we were
designed for.
thinking like maybe it's more like a trigger for longer samples, or maybe for, you know,
Yeah,
some,
that's a good idea. Like using a drum machine to trigger samples that are trigger
like,
LFOs on
yes,
other
yes.
instruments is a cool thing because you can. I found that I actually started using my sampler to trigger my drum beats on my analog drum machine. So I'll take a sample and then I'll use the CV out to actually take that rhythm pattern and have that actually create the rhythm pattern on my
Mm-hmm.
drum machine. In which I found is like, well, that ends up doing something
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect, and it ends up, and when you take something that wasn't supposed to be what you were doing, it's always good to kind of, you know, take something and use it for something else,
Yeah, yeah.
because it gives you a different way of doing it. And experimental musicians always go and say, well, I'm going to break that rule. I'm going to do this. I'm going to use it for what it wasn't supposed to be for. I'm going to use it for something else. And that's always,
Yeah.
I think that's cool when people do that. Kind of Brian Eno
Again, Brian
again.
Eno. Yeah, those are
like,
the classics, why
yeah,
we like them. Yes. And yeah, and
yeah.
recently during our terrible, pandemic, being at home many weeks, I thought, okay, a long time I wanted something portable, but also like very fast, some instrument that I could use fast, that I don't have to plug in my computer, that I don't have to plug in the MIDI keyboard.
Well, you want
Yeah,
like
something like
standalone.
that.
Yeah, I see more and more people are saying they want standalone machines because even when you go to do a performance, sometimes I've seen guys have to have two or three laptops as a backup because they
Mm,
glitch. So if you have a laptop and you're running Ableton Live and it glitches, it totally ruins your performance. But if you're using a hardware synth, they don't usually glitch. So I've been a big, like what I used to do as an old technique is back in the 70s, bands like The Who, like on Barbara O'Reilly and It Won't Be Fooled Again, there's an analog
hmm
sequence, right? And what they did is they put it on reel to reel tapes. And when they went to do the performance, they run that sequence off a tape machine because the tape machine was the only way to get that analog sound to be the same every time.
mm, hmm
And so what I do is I use the Zoom R24 digital recorder. It's a hardware recorder, and I'll record like an analog sequence. And if I have to do a show in New York and I've got this analog sequence that I can't exactly replicate, but I want it to be the same, I'll just have it running off my R24, which is far more stable than any laptop. Because it'll just run it. And it'll
hmm
never have a problem. And then I'll play over it. And so there's ways that you can. I've always liked hardware, just because it's portable and easy to control, and I can put my ideas down without having to go and sit down on a grid. And I'm more of a guy like I'd rather play it than put it on the grid.
mm, hmm
So I'd rather just put it down onto a tape machine and then overdub and then do it on the tape machine because I have all my synths around me. And if I have all my synths around me and I have my tape machine, I can just keep on overdubbing and putting tracks on top of tracks. And I kind of just let it be more like old school 70s recording, which allows you to kind of just do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about the quantize. You don't have to worry about it not rendering right because it just takes the sound as it is. See,
hmm
what you hear is what you get. And sometimes in electronic music, you don't want it to get ruined by the
That's
render.
true.
Because some programs, if you don't have enough memory, it won't render right.
Yeah, that's true. And this usually happens at the
But
live set. It never happens at home, but as soon as you're out there, it does.
yeah, yeah. So if you use like a board type of recorder, like a Behringer Wing or a Cascam 24, and you actually have it on an SD card that's inside of these machines, they're hardware machines that are musical instruments, and they tend to be far more reliable than any computer. So if you put your tracks on machines like that, and then you play over them, you don't get the same kind of problem. Then I have like, real time mixers that I can alter that signal. I can go and take a signal coming from my recorder and then
hmm
run it through a bit crush. and then I changed it real time, or run it through a roller, or run it through a delay, or run it through my Moog's real spring reverb, and doing stuff like that, and you become like a DJ, but you're doing DJ stuff with hardware synths. They're far more. It's actually like you're really playing,
Yeah.
because you are. And you know, you actually are playing instruments, and so when you do the performance, it's not like you just, not to put down some guys, but like you're not just jumping up and down and there's a CDJ and you're pushing a button. You're actually manipulating a control that's musical. So you're actually like if you were a guitar player bending a note, you're doing something similar. Um, so it feels more real, at least to me.
Yeah, it has the feeling, of the touch. It's not that all automated.
Yeah, I think so. I think more. Yeah, I think more and more musicians I talk to are trying to bring a performance aspect to their music when they play live. So when you do play live, are you trying to do more performance, actually physically playing, or is it more about like audio visual, and you want to make the song be the same song, so then you can't really play it exactly if it's been pre-recorded. So have you kind of run through, like, when you do shows, are you doing like live performance, or are you doing more like theatrical
Rather live performance. But I use Ableton, and I use also Machine Jam. So this is kind of unusual. But yeah, for like the reasons of how expensive was the push, I still didn't decide to buy it. And I found Machine Jam quite interesting. I think I bought it, I think 2 years ago, something like that. Yeah, really
You've been
good.
able to get it to work pretty good for you?
Yeah, to map the stuff, and it's quite well mapped, and to map the effects, for example, the touch strips, with the right effects enabled, and it's very easy. So that was really no effort. And I'm trying to recreate the songs, but I also try to play around. So, and also like I exercise, like I make rehearsals, but I don't focus that much on if the song is exactly, clip by clip, especially.
Oh, yeah. So you kind of you experiment a little bit. You do a little improvisation. You
Yes,
don't do
that's the
exactly
thing.
the
I
same.
like to improvise. I keep more or less the structure probably, but not even sometimes not really. So I just not everything exactly.
Not
So
everything.
I'm just playing around with the clips, and for the last live set that I did, I decided to, for example, completely change the song. So like to take the melodic parts of the songs, the tracks, but I decided to go for completely different drums, meaning rhythms. So I decided, yeah, to
Or
go
particular drums.
towards a
Yeah.
different rhythmic, and instead of having I don't know, very simple rhythms, I decided for some more complex, or some break beaty, you could call it, stuff. And I also then like to tweak the effects. So this is
Do you like to use your 707 and your TR-8? Do you
so
use
that's
those live, or
this
just
is
for
because the
recording?
project Lichtpause is very, very new, and we started with the idea started a year ago, and we did a live performance, but this was not yet that what we really wanted to achieve. That we are still not, we're not performing with these machines, but these are our machines for this new project, where we want to use them as well, like for recording, music creation, and then live performance. So that was the benefit that we saw at the beginning, that we can make music on them, and then
Yeah.
have it faster ready for the live show. But that's not true because we are so demanding in the song
Yeah.
creation, and we have different ideas, and we need external samples because we work with old movies. So basically for this project, we wanted to be very audiovisual. So for my own, for Kata Dumur, live sets, they are very just simple music live sets. But for Lichtpause, we want to. This is why the word Licht is like it means light in German, but the whole word
Okay.
means like a blueprint. It's basic the German word for blueprint.
Oh, blueprint.
So we want to have it somehow really integrated with visual side, and this is why we use a software called Resolume. And
Oh, so that ties it
yeah,
exactly to your track. So if you're running it through Ableton, then it will
exactly.
actually
That's the thing, and we
synchronize
can
with the
actually
video.
synchronize Resolume directly with 707 or TR.
Oh, the
Yeah, through
707
MIDI,
allows you to do that.
I think
They
we
updated it.
it's
That's
possible.
cool.
And yeah, and so we are using, for example, films from public domain. Uh, yeah, and I think you could see this on
Oh,
our
cool.
Instagram account. It's very fresh,
Yeah,
very
I've seen
few
some of it.
things there, but yeah, this is a very exciting project, and we are really looking forward to like put out music, and that's the target that we start, to publish. We are doing self-publishing, and that we get ready with our live show, and then it will be really audiovisual experience. This is the target for it, and unfortunately we wanted to have a start in October this year, but probably it will be not possible. So, but we said, okay,
Yeah,
next year, fine.
yeah, yeah. Like all the live
Yeah.
shows I wanted to do in New York aren't really going to happen. So I've been changing it so I do performances on Facebook Live and Twitch from my bedroom studio. Yeah, if you see my Instagram, you
Oh
probably
yeah.
see my purple light in my bedroom, and I do these like all my modes and stuff. I just play these live shows. Um, um, but yeah, I mean, it's not the same as going to New York and playing in New York. But
Yeah, that's what
yeah,
we
I
have to
do what I
do.
can. So that kind of goes into the whole thing with
Mm-hmm.
the questions about Corona. So if you had live shows and they got postponed, and you're not gonna be able to play them, are you thinking of trying to hook up with some of the? There are some companies now, or people on the net that are doing live performances, where they're doing these kind of like
Mm-hmm.
little online festivals, and they'll run like 4 or 5 bands for like 2 hours, and every band's doing like a 20-minute set from their home studio, and able to kind of get out there. Um, so have you looked into that, or are you going to do your own type of performance, or are you going to link
So
up
I
with anybody
actually
that's
would
doing
like
that?
to do it on my own, because I'm not playing live that often, not really. And that's why I'm not
Mm-hmm.
and experimental music is difficult. So I think in our
Yeah,
genre it's rather yeah, the offer that we can put out there. So yeah, I'm looking into it, a little bit getting ready, but still I didn't prepare anything, but I would really love to. I would really like to do
yeah,
this
yeah.
in next weeks. Yeah, would be very cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool. I mean, like, I've been actually as an artist for like 3 years. I've been doing like
Hmm.
Facebook Live performances from my studio, and I just I did a simple thing with like a Roland Go mixer on a tripod, linked up to my Zoom mixer, and I can get a pretty good audio and a pretty good visual off an iPhone. And I've been able to kind of get away with it for a while, and I've been increasing my capability by getting better cameras and better gear and better mics and everything. But it seems now that it's a good time to invest in
Oh
capabilities to
yeah.
do like multiple camera shots. Like there's all kinds of devices that allow you to have like integrate like 3 phones and get 3 camera shots in the have it got swapping different angles while you're playing automatically. And so when you're in your bedroom playing, you can have one camera focus on your keyboard or focus with your hands, another camera from further away, another camera from another angle, and they'll all kind of switch around. And and you can even control it if you want to. But Yeah, there's a lot of cool things that you can do today that don't cost as much as they used to actually do it, and you don't actually have to have a cameraman, or there's some automation and the things that you can do. So it actually is a whole new world where if you want to get out there and do live performing, it's more
Yes,
possible
absolutely. It's so
than it
much
was.
easier now. Or even, even to
Yeah, yeah,
record the
exactly.
performance and stream it like that, record it. This could be also an option, or just put a video out there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you can actually, if you want to make it perfect, you can pre-record it and then push it up to YouTube or push it up to Twitch. The Twitch does have the ability to upload video if you have a certain level account. So there's all kinds of cool things. I tend to do kind of like stream of consciousness live jamming is how I do stuff. And so when I do my
Mm-hmm,
shows, I
mm-hmm.
would kind of just go out and
Yeah.
just jam. And so because that's what I feel. Well, if I'm going to do it, I'll just give the fans something different. Because I'm just going to go and just do like a practice or a rehearsal and live record it. And so and I find it's a certain my fans like find it interesting to see that. Some artists are like, well, I don't want to put something out that's not perfect. So then it kind of
Oh,
depends on
yeah.
what kind of artist you are, what you're willing
Yeah,
to
that's
deal
true.
with in terms of how people see you and see your work, if you're confident enough to do it or not do it. But so have you I know you collaborate within you have like a collective that you work with, right? Um, you work with a group of electronic musicians, right? You have been
So
working
you
with them
mean, do you mean
previously,
like
right?
the meetup thing? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that meetup. That seemed like
Yeah,
like
so
a
it was
collaboration with a bunch
rather
of other
like
artists.
a true meetup. So we used to meet and talk about music and show each other's productions and comment on them, or we were talking about hardware, software. So this was more of I would say, yeah, meeting with peers and exchange. Yeah, so it was not,
Oh,
no,
okay.
no.
So this is not a performance, but
Yeah, it
we're
was more
talking
more
about
like
how
a
you do things.
support group. Yeah, something like that.
Well, that's cool. But have you thought of like I know in Berlin there's a big electronic music scene that goes back to when
Mm-hmm.
Eno and Bowie and Kraftwerk were there. Do you guys are you in that scene? Do you like participate in the scene that's out there, or is there a new
Well,
scene
so
in
I
Germany
think it's
for
like
that?
this in Munich. How should I say? I think it's a little bit different. And actually, I'm now more involved with like female groups or like feminists. And this is quite, getting more popularity here. But I tend to be the person who is doing the workshops. So I'm rather like teaching Ableton, for example, or I'm teaching some creative techniques, and rather than
Okay,
and yeah, like actually
actually
collaborating, something like
collaborating.
that. Many of my friends are DJs, and they have there are some DJ collectives, but I'm not really seeing, at least in Munich, something like a collaborative music making.
Oh, so you're not getting like seeing like a scene where like there's other bands like yourself or
Yeah,
other artists like
yeah,
yourself that want to like jam. Like I grew up like in the punk era, right? So when like the Sex Pistols and the Clash were around, so in my basement we go grab another couple other punk bands from around
oh,
the
that's so
corner,
awesome.
and
Yeah.
then we'd all kind of jam. Um, and kind of like where I came from is kind of this punk aesthetic where I was into playing like Sex Pistols. I would say like bands like New Order, that type of thing. That was I was really into
Oh, this is my
Depeche Mode.
favorite
I was
band.
into that kind of when punk kind of
Yeah,
went from Joy Division, from to
yeah,
like the
those
new
are my favorite
romantic
bands.
or
I
post
love
punks.
Depeche Mode. I
We
actually
did,
learned so much from them with time, listening to more and more of the music.
yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned like that you are reusing your songs. And you tweak, you process your own songs and create something new from fragments, for example, of your songs. if I understood correctly. Yeah, and I see
Yeah,
that, for
I
example,
love.
in many Depeche
Yeah,
Mode, songs, you hear that snippets, you hear that pieces where they would reuse, some parts, and
they're really good at that. Yeah, they were very good at
yeah,
doing
and I
that. They were
think
like
that's
mining their
basically
own
that's
material.
Alan Wilder. He was the mastermind. He's awesome.
Yeah,
I also like
he
the
was great.
Recoil, his project that he did
Math.
afterwards. Also very inspiring.
Oh yeah, that stuff is brilliant. Yeah, well, I love anybody that kind of took, well, craft work was I was big into craft work. I mean, I was a big fan of Prince, but I knew a lot of what Prince initially started
Mm,
with was stuff that came from craft work. And then I was like really interested. And I got into Bowie's low period when he was in Germany
yeah.
with, when they were doing all the, Heroes and Low and all the Berlin records. And I got really like deep into like, okay, well, how were they doing that? And then I was looking at the modes and the arcs in the Jupiters and Jupiter 4s and Jupiter 6s that they were using. And that's why I kind of got into electronic music. I was a hardware guy. I was always into like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
Duran Duran's using a Jupiter 8, or this band's using a Prophet 5, or this band's using an an OBX. I was into like what synth are they using,
Mm-hmm.
and then I
Exactly.
go try to find it. you know, and because
Oh
I'm a
yeah.
programmer, so I had the money to go find them. but I would go find them, and I was like, okay, well, that's how these sounds are. Because some, like, it's weird. Some synthesizers are like guitars. Like you go find, like, you're a guitar
Mm-hmm.
player and you say, well, a 55 Les Paul or Rickenbacker, every certain model modes have different characteristics. Like a 74
Mm-hmm.
Model D sounds different than a 72, and they're the same model, but they don't sound the same. And then if you find them and you can use them like that, and that's what I found is like, okay, we get these classic synths, they actually all sound different, and it gives you tones that you can't get, and it just because they age, they act different, they have different capabilities. So yeah, it was just something I was really drawn
Oh
into,
yes.
the uniqueness of the certain
Yeah.
hardware and how you could use that
Yeah, so for
in your
example,
music.
recently I bought, really, the 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I bought Yamaha Reface CS, so the remake of the CS, yeah.
Well,
And because
yeah,
I
that's a good
like
machine.
to model the sound, with my hands, and it's such a pleasure, and I this is why I'm talking about coming back to songwriting, because I managed, I think, to write already 4 songs, and I come up with lyrics, and I can't, and that this muse is suddenly there. So I'm really surprised how just to be with the right instrument can influence that.
Yeah, that's what I found. Yeah, I found that, like, there was a period of time that was weird. Like, since
Mhm.
initially had all these controls on them, and then you get to like the late '90s, and suddenly they start making
Mhm.
them like the DX7, which doesn't have it, and then a lot of things end up losing the knob
Mhm.
per function. What they call it is like knob per function. So 1960s and 70s, even up to the 80s, synthesizers all have knob per function, which means that you can actually play them like a Hammond organ, which means that you can actually fool around with the sliders while you're playing
Mhm.
and actually use it as part of the instrument. And that's one of the great things about like a Jupiter 8 or a Roland D50 or the mini modes. What's famous about them is the fact that you can play with the filter while you play in the keys and use it like a pitch bend. You can use the resonance, you can use all the dials, all the sliders can be used as musical aspects. So when you play, you can get a very unique sound. Like if you're soloing on a mini moog and you use all the capabilities of what the mini moog can do, you're not just using the pitch bender. You can use, the LFO, you can use the resonance, you can use the mixing the oscillators together to create, really interesting sounds that sound kind of like you're doing modulation while you're doing the solo. And that is nothing you can't
Yes,
really
yes.
replace that with a MIDI keyboard because you can't do it. I mean, unless you put automations
Yeah.
into it, but even then, you're not controlling it real time like what you can do with a hardware synth. And I've always kind of tell your younger generation, they said, "Oh, I can do everything on my MIDI." It's like not exactly. um, Not that it's cool that people have access to stuff, but having a real MIDI mode, it's kind of hard to like. You can't really do on a MIDI keyboard what you can do on a real MIDI mode,
Yeah,
and you can try to say
yeah,
you
it's
can, but you
interesting
really
that
can't.
after some years of doing just everything in the computer, I come to the conclusion. It's not that I think it's better. I just think that I find the quality in it, to make music in this way.
Yeah, I mean, I can use a hard. Yeah, I mean, there's a use for doing Ableton. There's a use for using a DAW. There's a lot of things I can do in a DAW that,
Yeah.
yeah, fine, that's cool, and I use it as a tool. Like George Martin used the studio as a tool. You can use your DAW as a tool, and you can use your DAW as an instrument. But but it's always good to have a real guitar. It's always good to have a real bass or a real drum or a hardware synth, because there's some things that you can do that will add to the song, you know. And so I think that's it's the kind of like you take everything that's out there, and there's some things that are good and they're bad or better or maybe different, and if you can take it all and use it all where it needs it, then you can service
Oh,
the
yes.
song with
Oh,
whatever it
yeah.
needs.
You asked me about Berlin and the community. So, yeah, I think I wanted still to come back to this and like to say something about the modern times. So in Munich, I feel there's the club culture. There are the fresh young collectives, but they're more like from my perspective, like more DJ and party. Yeah, party is
DJ
very
oriented,
here
yeah,
something that yeah and in Berlin,
it's
of course,
different.
I think there's more experimental vibe. I also have some friends in Berlin, and I feel that there's much more going on, and there are always some cool festivals. Like every week you can go to some very interesting event or learn something or take part in a workshop. I think this is really cool. And now this weekend there was a Ableton Loop, let's say, conference. I mean, normally it would happen obviously in Berlin, and I have my ticket,
Yeah.
and it's waiting for the next year. So I'm really happy for the next year.
Was that the super booth? Is that super booth that
Yeah,
happens
yeah,
in
yeah.
like
It's
that area?
this
There's
year
a thing
actually
called
they would
super booth.
happen in the same
That,
time. So I was very also like, oh come on. I mean, I'm not that not into modular synthesis, but I wanted to see also super booth, and it was
mhm.
planned actually at the same time in the same time. So, but now both had to go online,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. I saw they did a
yeah,
home
yeah,
edition
exactly.
for
And
super booth.
Loop
I've been watching the
made
videos.
also like a Loop at home edition, and they had the challenge every day, and I managed to
Yeah.
do the first challenge on Friday, and it was so much fun. I posted the video on Instagram, also on YouTube, and this is this was so cool because they actually like for me the whole you know all the people around Loop and Ableton are very creative, and people who visit Loop, there are people who are interested in field
Yeah, yeah.
recordings, in found sound, in transforming the sound, looking for new sounds or new possibilities, how to experiment, and that community is very
Yeah.
very positive. So I feel I feel at home always there. I've been to Loop in 2017. Then unfortunately 2018 I couldn't. That was
Hmm.
the LA edition, I guess. But yeah, it was, I think they made a good decision, like to
Yeah,
let
yeah,
it for 2019, and then everybody was waiting for this year. But yeah, so but even then, when there were these
yeah,
online challenges, you could see how people come together, how they want to work together, how they want to collaborate, and people did that, and this is really such a good energy. Yeah, so
yeah. I love doing collaborations. I've actually collaborated a couple times doing like long distance collaborations with other musicians. I actually put a record
mm-hmm,
out with a woman from LA that was an actress that actually used FL Studio, because she's an actor. That's her primary task, but she loves doing electronic music. So she had this alter ego
Mm-hmm.
Alt Control K, from different from her acting, and we put together a record, and we just had Skype meetings
Mm.
and
Yeah, of course.
sent files back and forth through Google Drive. And you know, she did her vocals, and then we'd have a meeting, and I'd listen to her vocal, and we said, "We'll tweak this." And you know,
Mm-hmm.
later she and she put in that video, run an effect on it, something I did on a Moog. And you know, there's I hear some bands saying, "Well, I can't do anything till I get to the recording studio." But 3 years ago, I did that album without going to the recording studio. We did it from our own home studios, and then we sent
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
on to get mastered. But there's a lot of stuff you can do today. And it depends on, you know, some people
Yeah.
want things to be at a certain level, and so then they have to go to a recording studio. But the technology is getting such do pretty good level recording if you're willing to be like, you know, indie alternative artist that's willing to put it out. You can still get your vision out, you know, and maybe
Yes. Yes.
so. I think people shouldn't be dissuaded from working on their projects. You might not be exactly what you wanted before this happened, but you could still get it out to people, and it would sound not bad. Um, and so people, I think, have to be willing to look at that. But you know, every artist is different. They want a certain level of stuff to be done. But it's
Yes,
great to
of
have you
course.
on the program. Um, we probably getting to close to our match time now, but we love talking to you. We love what you're doing. We're gonna put all the links that you gave us onto the podcast so people can click on all the projects that you're working on with your Linktree and your Instagram and your Spotify and every in your production company, which we didn't talk about. Maybe we'll talk about that before we close out. Your production company, we want to talk about what you do there?
Oh yeah. So I so unfortunate because all comes to this time now, Corona. So it's my it's like a small studio, and I started like with some little branding job, which I had in 2018. And then I thought, wow, this is something. And I even did like a small entrepreneurship course, you know, to get the stuff going. And this year was supposed to be the year when I really go full time with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Corona happened. So
Oh yeah, so you kind of
one,
put it on hold now. You got to wait.
yes, yeah, because you know, I was like, I'm gonna build a portfolio on this. I'm doing. I have a lot to do. I have to, you know, put together the reel, the composer's reel, and this branding reel. I have some more material to put on the website. And then, you know, the next step is to approach companies and to make contacts and go, you know, meet people, and that is just not possible now.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Everything has
everything
to
is
be.
on hold. Yeah, the whole
Yeah.
film industry, TV maybe, but I think it's all on hold. So yeah, and the wonderful thing that happened with that is that in March I did a sound walk. So this is this, let's say, sound kind of exploration, sound
Okay,
research, sound
you're
art
able to
thing.
do that. You're still able to do that without having to meet people
Yeah,
physically.
yeah. And that was like a project that was incorporated in Munich Creative Business Week. So that was really my like a small, I could say small success, but you know, just very open people who organized the whole conference. It's more like a design conference, but they also invite film industry. So I thought like audio, you know, and sound is also part of it, and they were very open to that project.
That's cool.
So yeah, so then also on the website of Foundwaves and also on my website, I put everything on Bandcamp. This is how people could stream the tracks and could go for a walk, and the whole walk is described on the website. And I think I did a video. This is again something that I have to do. Like I want now, especially now when people cannot go out, I have to put
Yeah,
together this video and like to give them like a little experience of the sound walk with the video, you know, that they can
that's cool.
watch
Well,
on
it's good
YouTube.
that you're able to still find ways to you know, put your projects together that you're trying to have an income stream on. And you know, that's what I've been doing as an artist. I kind of branched into this podcast to be able to do something other than my own art, that actually still is in the art space. And I've been working on collaborations and sync licensing, which is what you're
Oh
doing with
yeah.
your company.
Oh
Is
yes.
like I actually have some like a gig. I'm getting ready to work on an album. I got selected to be like somebody working on a production for this album that I got selected for. I can't say who it is, but I'm a musician, so I'll play. If somebody tells me what they need bass lines or they need pads or they need something, then I do that. And so when you're an electronic musician, it's easier to do that
Mm-hmm.
because you can just go onto your Moog or go onto your hardware synth and you can just do it.
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
true.
and you don't have to go to the studio because the hardware synth, if I put it into a good capture mechanism, I don't have to be in a studio to get it captured. Um, if I have the right equipment, and I've kind of built it over the years to have some equipment that I have the bare minimum that I can do to get it into that space. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things I've been telling other bands. You got to look into what you can do and what versus what you can't do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there's because we don't know how long we're going to be in this scenario. If you look at what happened in 1918, there were like three waves of these things,
Yes.
since we haven't had one since then. So people have to be kind of prepared potentially for the long haul. So it's good to kind of invest in yourself and invest in your capabilities of what you can do.
Absolutely. You sent a very good question here. Among the questions, that I got from you is that, the future of music, like the music industry. And it's been told so often that like in the music industry, we have to be like, unless we are, pop stars and we get millions,
Yeah, yeah,
we have to do so many things. So, things like teaching, and this is what I'm doing also, teaching, or doing workshops, doing creative work, but also commercial work, on many different levels. Sometimes more technical, sometimes only editing, sometimes
yeah. Just
and
become a recording engineer or become somebody's like producer or finisher.
yeah,
That
yeah,
you actually finish somebody's project by adding more depth to it, or sound processing because you've got like a tool that somebody wants, that you have. Like I got a spring reverb, a real spring reverb from a Moog that people don't have access to, and I can actually run somebody's music, run a vocal through it.
mm,
And then when I give it to them back, it's like I gave them a service of giving them that capability that they didn't have access to. So there's all kinds of things you can do in the new economy or this new Corona, post Corona or in the middle of Corona. Like, well, how are you gonna, as an artist, if you can't do the gig, if you can't go out and go to the venue, we have to find other ways of doing things. And so that's like where we are right now. And the problem, well, I think the other issue I think is the online streaming services are great and it gets you out there, but we don't get enough compensation to survive.
yeah, absolutely,
So the only way we survive is our side gigs, or a lot of bands I know that I've interviewed in the last 3 years is like physical shows are how they survived. And
yes,
without being able to go in their van and travel around the U.S. or travel around Europe, they have a hard time paying the bills. And so some like Spotify just put a donation button on profiles for artists that are verified. So now people can get donations. So if people have their favorite band and you have that set up, you can actually donate through PayPal or Cash App or whatever to your favorite band. There's a button. SoundCloud's doing the same
yeah,
thing. I think all of the services are realizing that artists are kind of strapped for cash, and they're starting to make it so that we can have other ways
yeah.
of getting income.
Yes, that's true. But yeah, it seems like also many people use Patreon and on a regular basis,
Yeah,
and I think it's really cool. I think this is something we will be also looking into. Yeah, with the new projects. Yeah, but that's the reality. Yeah, we can't just do one thing anymore.
no, yeah, you got to be able to diversify. And, and the thing is, like, I think artists like ourselves that do a lot of things are kind of multimedia.
Yeah.
Like an electronic musician is kind of better situated to work on a soundtrack, to work on a film, to work with an organization like a newspaper or TV than like a punk rock band.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of if you're in a limited niche, you might have limited appeal if you don't open up to other capabilities. Like if you're a musician, where maybe you could play other types of music. Maybe that's not what you want to do, but you might have to.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we're kind of putting ourselves now. Is like sometimes you're gonna have to think out of the box a little.
Yeah, and to like find yourself new, define yourself in this new reality. Mm.
Yes. Well, it's great talking to you. I enjoyed it very much. We tend to have artists come back on. So like if you have another project that's ready to be discussed, we can talk to you again in a couple of months, or next year whenever you're ready. We've had people come on 3-4 times if they have something new to say. So we're gonna put this out and we'll send you the links. And we really much very appreciate you taking the time to talk to Family Electric Ghost, and hope your fans check out all the links we're going to put on this episode. And stay safe, stay in good health and spirits during this Corona thing. And we hope to talk to you again in the future.
Thank you so much. It was lovely talking to you, and I have impression that I could talk so much more, that we would have so many subjects that we could touch on. And I have to say, I really enjoy the historical aspect that you always bring to your podcasts. That there's always this brilliant history of the good pop music. So yeah, I always enjoy that.
Well, I'm a fan as much of as being a musician. I'm kind of like a music historical. Like I love the history of music. Going back to Lead Belly, going back to Appalachian hillbilly music. My grandpa was born in West Virginia, and he had a banjo and a fiddle, and I got drawn to that kind of Americana, but I also like the blues in Louisiana and in Delta, you know, you know, R&B and blues. And so I to funk and heavy metal. I'm into everything, and so I think all music has value, and whether it's hip hop or rap or EDM or trance or glitch wave, and I meant anything that's cool or good. It has something that I'll listen to it, and I'll get into it and figure out where it came from. So that's my own personal curiosity, but. Thank you for noticing.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a big value. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good. I don't know if it's nighttime there now.
Yeah,
It's like 8 o'clock.
9 o'clock. It's already evening.
9 o'clock. Okay.
Yes.
Well, have a good night.
Stay healthy and good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.